You.
So this is the guys from the Meetup.
Hey,
I'll just have to put my computer over there so we can transmit on the display here. But I just wanted to show you the guys and show the guys you.
Any ladies in the audience?
Sorry?
No, unfortunately, no ladies.
Not? Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, that's only guys.
That's your challenge for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me place you guys on the projector. And let's see. Okay, so you guys are live now.
Awesome.
So this is Rob and Lisa. They both work on Stellar, and they will give us an introduction explanation about Stellar, the Stellar network, the Stellar organization, what are their focus, and what they want to achieve, like with Stellar. And Rob will also explain us a little bit about the details, like the technical details of the Stellar network. So feel free to go.
All right. This is slightly bizarre because you're looking at me, but I'm looking at this guy in the yellow shirt on the corner. But maybe we can just kind of quickly, to get some context, has anybody here looked at any of Stellar's APIs or documentation? Are most people like totally fresh, or is there some exposure? Maybe somebody can like give me a percentage of the room.
Yeah. Anybody have worked with it yet? Alguém já trabalhou com Stellar or conhece?
Yeah, so just the yellow shirt guy. So I think you're senior.
We were destined to be close to each other. Okay, great. Well, now is a great time to start. And so, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone at the team at Cheesecake. So, Rubens, Victor, Robert, everyone for setting this up. We are super happy to be engaging with more smart people in Brazil who are interested in exploring this space. So the game plan is, I'm going to give a short presentation, a general overview of Stellar, and how we're seeing it adopted in the marketplace. And Rob is going to give an overview of Stellar and kind of the technical resources and more of like a dev's sorry, a dev's approach to understanding Stellar. My name is Lisa Nestor. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Stellar.org. I've been with the company for 2 years. And actually was in Brazil, in Sao Paulo in March of this year, doing a couple meetups with a company called Crypto Market, which is an exchange in Brazil, as well as speaking at a money transfer conference that was hosted there. And I work with a lot of our partners in the Stellar ecosystem and try to educate and evangelize the platform.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob. I'm a developer here at Stellar. I've been here for I think about 7 months now. And then also on the side, I help with the SF cryptocurrency developer meetup. So this is actually the first time I've been on the other side of the table and spoken at a meetup. So this is super cool.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so I think we're gonna do a screen share real quick. So give us 1 minute to link that up and we'll get started. Right.
Yeah.
Can you guys see our screen now?
Sorry?
Can you see the screen? Or can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can.
Great. All right. Stellar. So, oh, give me 1 second. So Stellar is a global open source protocol for payments. That's how we like to characterize it. So what that means is that we consider Stellar as a distributed ledger infrastructure to be a very, very low-level protocol that can facilitate interoperability and value transfer between different users of the network. However, Stellar itself is generally accessed by applications which are built above the protocol. And so I think that it's really important to understand that while there may be individuals that hold lumens or use lumens, most users of the Stellar protocol are going to be accessing the network via an application or an institution that's using Stellar on their backend. So that's an important thing to understand. We consider ourselves a low-level protocol and depend on people and companies to launch high-quality applications on top of the Stellar protocol. Stellar is open source. All of our documentation is public. You can download Stellar Core and create your own private network tomorrow, or create an account and start issuing assets in the public network. And we very much believe in open source philosophy, and so follow a lot of that. So I imagine most of the people in the room are familiar with what a distributed ledger is, but just to reiterate, Stellar maintains a shared universal ledger. This ledger is hosted by servers all around the world independently. Each one of these servers or nodes has a copy of the ledger, and every 3 to 5 seconds, each of these nodes communicates and syncs with all of the other nodes in the network to update the status of the ledger. So in that way, Stellar is decentralized. If you take down any one node, the network will continue. And each node is able to maintain its own copy of the ledger, which is important. I think something to note here is that in comparison to Bitcoin, the nodes on the Stellar network are able to sync with each other much more quickly. So, 3 to 5 seconds as compared to maybe close to 30 to 40 minutes with the Bitcoin blockchain, or several minutes with the Ethereum network. And that's because we use a different type of consensus. Stellar uses the Stellar consensus protocol. We do not use proof of work or proof of stake. There is no mining in the Stellar network. Rob will touch on this a little bit, but to understand more about the Stellar consensus protocol, I recommend doing a little bit of a search on Google. There's a ton of great resources. It's just kind of a complex topic to dive into in 30 minutes, but it's a very, very important piece of Stellar, and why we think we're a really compelling infrastructure for payments. So a couple other things. The Stellar protocol is free to access and use. As mentioned, it's open source. It's also overseen by a nonprofit, which is the Stellar Development Foundation. That's where both Rob and I work. Stellar Development Foundation has been around for about 4 years. It's based in San Francisco, and our 3 core goals are technical stewardship. So we continue to write code for Stellar and to help lead decisions and governance decisions around the technical development of the platform. Also, we facilitate network expansion. So doing things like this, where we're educating developers or educating business owners about Stellar. This also includes Lumen distribution, which is a really fundamental aspect of what Stellar Development Foundation does. Stellar is similar to another protocol called Ripple, in that each protocol has, because we do not use proof of work or proof of stake, our native currency lumens was created and essentially issued the moment the network came online. And so what that means is Stellar is the oversees the distribution of about 95 billion lumens. Thus far, we've distributed just under 20% of that. And we do this through direct giveaways to individuals, for which I hope everybody here today will participate. We also do institutional partnerships, and we use a lot of, we intend to use many of the lumens to achieve goals around financial inclusion. And so that's network expansion. And then lastly, we obviously want to facilitate networking and collaboration amongst users in the network. This is especially important for payments. Payments is a two-person business. And so it's very important that the foundation support networking and collaboration between its users. So to jump into the kind of key features of Stellar, a very important thing to understand about Stellar is that it is a multi-asset ledger. So in Bitcoin, you have Bitcoin. In Ethereum, you primarily have Ethereum as first order assets, meaning we've done things like colored coins, or with Ethereum, you can, write scripts and contracts to issue, tokens. But in Stellar, Stellar is a multi-asset platform as kind of a first order or definition of how it operates. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in 1 minute. But what to understand from this is, along with lumens, we have over 3,000 different assets that have been issued inside of the Stellar network. We're seeing about 25 new assets issued every week. These assets usually come in 3 different forms. The first form is, I think, pretty well understood. It's an ICO, or a security token. So it's very easy to issue ICO tokens inside of Stellar. The second is currency tokens. So if a remittance company or a bank or a payment company wants to utilize Stellar, they're essentially going to be issuing a currency asset, so a Brazilian real or a US dollar or a euro, in order to process that transaction. The third type of asset tends to be not an ICO, not currency, really everything else. So you can imagine digitizing real estate equity, digitizing equity in a sports team, coffee bean tokens that represent different grades of beans. Basically, you can digitize any type of asset inside of Stellar. So it's a very diverse and multi-asset network. 2, it's very fast. I spoke about this earlier. This is around the consensus. So transactions in Stellar are settled in 3 to 5 seconds. Stellar is also extremely low cost. So right now you can process about 50,000 transactions on Stellar for 1 cent. You can of course compare this to the gas prices on Bitcoin or Ethereum, and it's really, really competitive. In addition, because we anticipate Stellar being used by financial institutions, we've built some additional tools that can be used, including a compliance protocol. This is something Rob will mention, I think, briefly, but it's just part of the toolkit available inside of Stellar. Right now, we can do about 1,000 operations per second. For comparison, the interbank settlement network SWIFT usually does at maximum around 400 to 500 transactions per second, while people like Visa and MasterCard are doing about 10,000 transactions per second. So we can beat the bank settlement network, but we still have some room to grow until we have the same processing power of someone like Visa or MasterCard. So those are really the main features of Stellar. So now I'm going to briefly dive into 2 of the major concepts of the Stellar network. I think if you understand these 2 operations, you have a good understanding of why Stellar is interesting. So the first, as I mentioned, is that inside of Stellar, you can digitally represent any type of currency or asset. This is achieved through anchors. So anchors are institutions that hold assets in the real world, allow companies or individuals to deposit and withdraw these assets from them, and they're able to digitally issue these assets inside of Stellar in order to transact. So if I'm a US bank and a customer comes in and gives me $100 and says, I want to send this to Sao Paulo, this bank will take the $100 deposit from the customer and they will issue 100 digital dollars from this bank into the Stellar network in order to execute the transaction. So there's two concepts here. One, you can digitally represent currencies, but two, those currencies are backed by an institution, which is very important. So this is the first major concept of Stellar. The second major concept is that we have something called a distributed exchange. So what this means is now that you have many, many different types of digital assets that have been issued inside of Stellar, you need an ability to trade them seamlessly, right? This is how we make sending money from the US to Brazil or Brazil to the US very easy. And so inside of Stellar, there is a built-in order book or distributed exchange where all of these different assets can be traded with each other. And this becomes really powerful. This is ultimately how you create interoperability between any company, any currency, or any network, right? So if PayPal has a PayPal US dollar and Western Union has a Western Union US dollar, and they start trading these assets inside of Stellar, you've just created interoperability between Western Union and PayPal in a very seamless way. And this is a really big problem in the payments industry. And so it's really important. The last ingredient that makes the distributed exchange very powerful is lumens. And this is because lumens serve as a bridge asset in the Stellar network. They're also used to pay fees, but most importantly, when you have so many different digital assets, imagine there's 100,000 different assets or currencies inside of Stellar. You want to be able to trade between them without having a one-to-one order for each trading pair. And so lumens can act as a bridge currency, meaning as long as your Nigerian naira are traded against lumens and your Chinese yuan are traded against lumens, you can execute a transaction that moves from Nigerian naira to Chinese yuan by taking two different orders, a Nigerian naira to XLM order, and then an XLM to Chinese yuan order. And this transaction from Nigerian naira to Chinese yuan is executed in 3 to 5 seconds. It is fully settled and it's atomic. An atomic means it either succeeds or it fails. So you will only ever have Nigerian naira or Chinese yuan. There's no risk that you as the sender or receiver would ever be stuck with lumens. So this is really, really powerful. Right now in the global payments world, this is what US dollars do. So almost every currency is traded against dollars. There's very little liquidity between Brazilian real and Mexican pesos, for example. So most transactions will go Brazilian real, US dollars, Mexican pesos. But it's an inefficient way of moving money. So having a new digital asset that can provide this bridge between trading pairs is very valuable. Okay, so just briefly, I'm going the wrong way. Just briefly, I'm going to discuss a couple use cases. So this Easy Remit is a money transfer company based in Bahrain that is next to Saudi Arabia. They have a large money transfer network, and they are integrating onto Stellar so that they can both send money to more places like the Philippines and Nigeria, but also so they can enable other companies to push payouts through their network. So they can facilitate payments into Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Malaysia, and also use other Stellar Network partners to send payments to the Philippines or Nigeria or Kenya. SureRemit is a company that's also doing remittances, but they're doing it in a non-traditional way. So they issued a SureRemit token inside of the Stellar network that acts more as a gift voucher. And then people can use dollars or pounds to buy the SureRemit token and then cash it out in Nigeria for Nigerian Naira. So they're kind of a more innovative remittance payments company. BloomX is another company based in the Philippines. So they're also doing remittances and payments over Stellar. So mainly receiving payments into the Philippines. But what they've also done is launched an application where they're helping these local money changers start selling crypto on the street. So you can see they have a merchant app, and then they've created a white label user app that the merchant can provide to their customers. And so then a customer can walk up to these shops and they can buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, Lumens, or they can sell. And this is really interesting because now that means that a user can receive Lumens into one of these apps and then just walk up to a local money changer and exchange those Lumens for pesos, which is really powerful. And finally, these are some of the non-payment use cases that we're seeing. So one of the largest ICOs on Stellar, and the first major one was Mobius. So Mobius is building decentralized app stores, primarily focused on developers building gaming platforms. And they use the Mobius token in order to easily receive payments from users for using their gaming applications. Kik is a pretty well-known messenger app that is issuing a token using Stellar in order to monetize some of their messaging services. Bex 360 is a company that's helping coffee bean farmers receive more for their crop. So most of the time, a coffee bean farmer will harvest and then sell his coffee beans to a middleman who then takes them to market and sells to end retailers. Bex 360 has created a machine that will grade coffee beans on site with the farmer, issue them tokens for the different grades of coffee beans, and then once the coffee beans are sold, they'll receive that payment based on the grade of the different grades that they provided. And then lastly, Satoshi Pay is a nano payment content platform. So they're working with major publishers in Europe, such as, I'm forgetting the name, but essentially using Stellar as a backend to make micro payments for content. So watching 5 seconds of a video or reading 2 sentences of an article, which is great because Stellar is so low cost. It's a great infrastructure to build this. So that's all from me. I hope that was helpful, and I'll let Rob take it over from here.
Cool. Hey everyone. So as I said, my name is Rob. I'm a software developer at Stellar. I've called my talk A Journey Through the Stack because basically about 10 months ago, I was trying to build an app on Stellar. This was actually a few months before I joined the team. And in trying to build this app, I was a little confused and intimidated by all these different moving parts. You'll see stuff in this talk such as Horizon and Stellar Core and SDKs. And if you don't understand how these things work together, it may be hard to construct an app. So that's kind of the focus of this. Cool. So it's kind of from a general high-level view, this is kind of what I will be going over. Cool. So let's start at the bottom. So at the bottom of the stack, you have user. And for this demonstration, we'll have Alice and we'll have Bob. And Alice wants to send 10 lumens to Bob. And this is typically what Stellar is used for. Just payments. Cool. And then, so how would Alice and Bob interact with the Stellar network? Well, there would be applications and wallets. So as you can see here, here's some of the different applications on Stellar. These are a little bit of a different sort of use case than what Lisa was talking about. You can see here an example of a interface to the Stellar Decentralized Exchange. Here is actually an iOS wallet that just launched today, which is super exciting. Here is a block explorer, which is also really cool. So your question may be, so okay, I am an app developer. I can do full stack. You know, I love the React framework, but how do I, as a developer, interface with the Stellar network? Well, for this, we have SDKs. SDKs are software development kits. And essentially what these provide is a simplified interface for interacting with the Stellar network via a wrapper around the Horizon API, which we will discuss next. So these are super cool, and they allow for really easy interface so that if you're building one of these really cool applications, you know, you can choose any language you want and interact with Stellar. And currently we offer JavaScript, Go, Python, Java, etc. A few of these are maintained by Stellar, but actually most of them are maintained by the community, which is super, super cool. So next we'll jump into Horizon. So what is Horizon? Horizon is a client-facing RESTful HTTP API server that sits between Stellar Core and Stellar applications. And the main purpose of Horizon is to take data from Stellar Core and make it easier for app developers to access and work with. Because Stellar Core is much like Bitcoin Core or an Ethereum client, the purpose of Stellar Core is to interface with this decentralized network. And one of the biggest, the most important parts of a node or a Stellar Core instance is that is performance. So a lot of this data is not easily readable by a client who wants to access this data. So for example, if Horizon didn't exist, you have to query this database and you get these weird, cryptic, super optimized data that's just impossible to work with. So that's essentially the purpose of Horizon. So as you can see here, these are the basic key functionalities of Horizon. Data ingestion, meaning it takes data it receives from Stellar Core and it makes it much easier for a developer to use. Transaction submission, so if you're using an SDK and you want to submit a transaction, you'd submit it through this Horizon instance, which basically orders transactions so that when you submit it to the network, it's optimized. Event subscription, which is super cool. So let's say you're an exchange and you want to integrate with Stellar. You'd probably want to stream transactions so that you know when new payments are made to your wallet. And so you can easily do this through the Horizon instance. And the last is just basic data querying. So let's say you want to know the latest ledger or the latest account or the latest balance of your account. This is just a simple like REST API. So it'd be like horizon.org/account/ whatever your public key is. Cool. So yeah, so we'll move into Stellar Core. So if you're familiar with like Bitcoin and Ethereum, think like Bitcoin node. That's essentially what Stellar Core is. It's a node, or as we like to call it, a validator. And this is your lowest level interface for communicating with and participating in the Stellar network. And so the basic features of this are, for one, to hold the distributed ledger. So as Lisa kind of talked about, every single node will have its own copy of the ledger. And I'll kind of get into that, but that's why people love this decentralized technology. There's no central point of failure. So some of the other uses or some of the other things that a Stellar Core instance does is it is the final interface for submitting transactions to the network. It supports that Horizon instance that I just discussed. It actually participates in consensus, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. Essentially, this is the heart of the network. And Stellar, unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum, has 4 different types of these validator instances. You can be a watcher, which literally just watches the network, an archiver, which just keeps an archive of all the data, which is important for data replication. Let's say a majority of the nodes go offline, you need at least one node that would hold the ledger. And then a full validator, which, as the name says, does everything. Cool. So then you get to the network, and this is what separates us from like a centralized bank. So yeah, so the decentralized or the network is a decentralized network of nodes, and each node in the network has its own copy of the distributed ledger. So just like in any other decentralized cryptocurrency, there's no central point of failure. If 50% of the nodes go down, there's always at least 50% up and running. And then cool. So then you may be wondering, finally, so each of these nodes all have their own copy of the ledger, but how can they agree on the current state of the ledger? And for that, you have the consensus protocol. Ours is called the Stellar Consensus Protocol, which is actually a federated Byzantine agreement protocol. That's the fancy terminology for it. And kind of a simplified way, explanation of how it works is every single node who participates in consensus will select the other nodes in the network that it trusts. And the way it would make the selection is online, there's a few of these node directories. And so, for example, if I wanted to run a node, I would publish along with my node at some given domain a description of who I am and what my node represents. So I might have like robdurst.com. And so then when you query this list or this directory, you'd see robdurst.com. You'd be like, okay, I trust Rob. I'm going to include him in my what we call a quorum set. So I'd create this set of all the people I trust. And then as you can see here, everyone else has their own set of people they trust. And at the end of the day, you would have these quorum intersections. And so once all that works out, basically everyone can agree on the current state of the ledger. And every 5 seconds, they would take in new transactions that everyone has received, agree on which of those should be added to the ledger, and then you just keep going with this blockchain. And so some of the key benefits of this SCP consensus protocol versus like proof of work or proof of stake can be seen in this diagram. And I'm sure you still might have some questions. This is pretty high level, and as Lisa was saying, there's a talk online that goes into a few more details.
You listen to me. That is just one thing. There's levels of trust.
Correct.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Can you? What do you mean there are levels of trust?
Can you go back one page?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the transaction to be accepted, there's levels of trust there. The network, it's necessary more trust. More the nodes works with each other, more trust they have. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine like this blue node here.
If we put a node right now, it's not trust. It's not a trustful node, right? You need time. You need to have more engagement with the other nodes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think something powerful about Stellar is this idea of nodes trusting each other, and then through the intersection of trust groups, you're able to achieve consensus overall. So what this does is 2 things. One, it allows, okay, so we say here, Stellar empowers known actors. So as Rob was describing, most nodes are going to tell you who they are, right? So this isn't going to be an anonymous node here. This is going to be a node run by, you know, I don't know, MoneyGram, or a node run by Stellarport, or, you know, a company in the Stellar ecosystem. And so then when I come onto the network as a node, I'm going to select a sub-network of other nodes to put into my quorum set as my core counterparties. And so and so what this means is that companies that many people trust will have many people including them in their quorum, right? So for example, if you know, the US Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the US, became a node, I would guess that every other bank on the Stellar network would trust them because they're a, you know, they're a trustworthy institution. And so what it means is that Stellar can naturally create a trust hierarchy that reflects the trust hierarchy that exists in the real world without forcing it. But the second powerful thing is that if you have a malicious node, right? This guy over here in pink, he can only do so much damage because all of the other nodes can decide to not trust him. And so your reputation matters inside of Stellar. If you're a malicious node, if you don't reveal your identity, nobody will include you in their quorum set. And so your impact on the network will be very, very low. So by having these quorum groups, it allows for the network to grow in a very organic way. You know, banks in Brazil trust banks in Brazil, banks in China trust banks in China, but maybe banks in Brazil don't trust banks in China. And that's okay. You don't have to be in the same quorum set, but you can still achieve consensus across the ledger. So it can grow organically, but it also is very resilient to bad actors because nodes can trust, you know, who they want, if that makes sense.
Yes, makes sense. So everyone can be a node, right?
Yes.
Like me, I want to be a node right now.
Yep.
So with time, the network can trust me. In the moment, I am trust, but with time, I can improve my trust.
Sure, absolutely. Yep, yeah. I think that that's a good way of thinking about it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So that was nice. So there's for this last couple slides. Let's kind of put all this stuff together. So here, let's kind of like visualize how all this works. So let's go back to Alice and Bob. So let's say Alice wants to send 10 lumens to Bob, right? So they're both at the user level. Well, Alice would then interact with some sort of UI or some sort of application wallet. And she'd go on her wallet and she'd take Bob's public address and say, send 10 lumens to Bob. And so this wallet would be using some sort of functionality from an SDK that would then create this transaction, format it, send it to the Horizon API, and then also subscribe a callback. This Horizon API would order the transaction. It would then send it to the Stellar network or the Stellar core instance. The Stellar core instance would propagate it to all its peers in the network, who would then propagate it to all their peers so that everyone in the network's heard of this transaction. And then at that 5-second interval, consensus would happen. And if this is indeed a valid transaction, it would be added to the ledger. So every core instance in the network would hear of this. The specific one that is tied to that Horizon instance would hear this. Horizon would ingest this data. It would see that, in fact, the transaction that Alice and Bob care about has been complete. It would communicate that with Bob's wallet, and then Bob would then see that he's received his 10 lumens. That's kind of a high-level overview of how every single part of the whole system works together. So cool. So hopefully now you're thinking, how can I get involved? So here's kind of just a smorgasbord of everything that can help you get going with Stellar. So of course, we have our GitHub. We also have a Stack Exchange, which is an awesome place for you to ask questions, but also for you probably to see that someone else has already asked and gotten an answer to a specific question. We do have a testnet, and one thing I absolutely love about the Stellar testnet is that built within our Stellar laboratory, there's this thing called the friend bot. And so if you generate a Stellar address, you can just give it to the friend bot and it'll send you lumens, versus anyone who's messed around with the Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other cryptocurrencies. A lot of times you have to go in forums and just beg and beg and beg for these testnet coins. And then after that, we have Stellar Laboratory, which is basically a really nice UI or interface to the Horizon endpoints. Stellar Expert is personally my favorite Stellar Block Explorer. And then a lot of the topics I covered here were pretty high level. And so I totally recommend checking out our developer docs, which have guides on how every single part of the network works. And then if you get through all of that and you're just like, wow, I really want to build something, I recommend you check out our Stellar Build Challenge, and I've included a link here. What happens is, I think every quarter.
Yep, quarterly.
every quarter we have this this build challenge with a couple themes. And if you build something and submit it, not only will there be a really good chance you win, but we've been rather generous with our prizes. So I definitely recommend you check it out. And then for just generally keeping up with Stellar, we have Twitter, Reddit, and this really cool community created and community maintained forum called Galactic Cod.
There's another one as well called Luminauts, which I haven't updated, but they are the go-to source for announcements and news in the Stellar community. Luminauts is Lumenauts. That's it. So we will stop sharing. Ooh. Is everybody still there? Did everybody leave the room?
Cool.
You guys are still there. Thank you guys. Let's give a round of applause for really awesome, really amazing. I have also a question. Like, let me ask first. Does anyone have a question about the presentation or whatsoever? Any doubts, comments?
There's got to be at least one.
Well, I do.
Yeah, feel free to do so. Yeah.
Now I was gonna wait because I've been tracking Stellar for a long time. I really like the idea. I think it's one of the I don't know, the cleanest development environment, the cleanest I'm gonna say website to find resources to to get started. That's something people don't really care a lot. Especially if you come from Bitcoin, it's horrible. Like, but when you see Stellar, it's really neat. Like the website, just don't know where the community interacts. Do you guys have a website, or I'm sorry, are you guys using Slack, Telegram?
Sure.
I don't know. Discord.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of reactions. First of all, thank you very much. I would say that the context here is that Stellar ultimately is somewhat mission driven as a company, and we want there to be a common free infrastructure for anyone anywhere in the world to be able to access the global economic marketplace, right? And so what that means is that we have to create documentation and tools for the lowest common denominator. Whereas I think, in some communities, it's attracted very, very skilled developers, and that is super important. We have those in Stellar as well, but our ultimate goal is that any developer anywhere can build an application and connect their community to Stellar. So that's why we take our documentation very seriously. I would say we do have some good community places. We have a Slack, a public Slack. Our Reddit tends to be very active. We have been less great at maintaining like Telegram channels. We're a little conservative sometimes about, promoting our token, or not our token, or about promoting lumens, or like being a little bit too much of a hype man. But that's actually a major goal for us as an organization right now, is to really bring together the community more. And so hopefully in the next few months, you'll see a few new community tools and spaces being launched. And we're also hoping to do a much bigger roadshow where we're focusing a lot on dev training, as well as spotlighting the companies that have already built on Stellar, because that's really the best way to learn and understand the value, is to hear it from a user, not from us.
Got it. And that was my second question to you guys. So what was the on the roadmap? So meaning, for example, we have a how can I say, Stellar has a sort of a niche, a world. It has its role. We see a lot of companies using Stellar. How do you see yourselves in, say, 5 years from now? Because 5 years is 50 years in crypto.
I know, that's like 1 year would be an easier question to answer. Yeah, I mean, I think we want to see a very healthy and diverse and competitive ecosystem of applications and service providers running on top of Stellar. In 5 years, I would love to see an application on Stellar in every country in the world. I think that that's feasible. I think, you know, there is a lot of things changing. As somebody who spends a lot of time in the payments industry with like legacy companies, their whole world is getting changed right now with distributed ledger. I think the way people do business and payments is going to change. It's going to be much more decentralized exchanges are going to become very powerful ecosystems. But yeah, I mean, I think success in 5 years for us is a lot of people knowing how to build on Stellar. You know, every country in the world having an endpoint connected to the network and seeing a lot of people who have built successful businesses and launched new products on top of the protocol.
Okay. Nice.
That's kind of a cheap answer. I'm sorry.
No, but I see you. You have a lot of companies involved, so it's more than a lot of people can, you know, say about their, you know, their network. So
yeah. Cool.
Does anyone have another question? Like, feel free. Now is the time. You know, you can ask everything you want.
I will ask you.
Is anybody gonna like check out Stellar afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think most of them, yeah. And also, we will be giving Lumens invites for the folks who came here. So I will share later on the Meetup page. But you can just like fill the formula, and you'll get some free Lumens to check out the network. And you can use their test nest, but you can use also these Lumens to play around the network.
Yeah, I mean, when you get your lumens, I encourage you to send them to each other. I think you'll blink and the money will be there, and that will be fun. But then I also encourage you to go use your lumens to get other assets inside of Stellar and start to see what it's like to have an account that has lumens and euros and Mobi tokens and Filipino pesos. And you can just start doing whatever you want with those things. It's pretty fun and exciting.
Awesome. Cool. Really awesome. Let's give another round of applause for. Just wanted to thank you like really much for doing this presentation for us. It like means more to us to have like an international speaker speaking to us, which won't be possible in another way. And we just really want to thank you guys for helping to build like this blockchain ecosystem here in Florianopolis. And thank you for your participation on this first meetup of blockchain for devs. So it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just ask one favor, if you guys could launch some awesome companies on Stellar so I can come to Florianopolis, I would really appreciate that.
I'm sure someone here will do this. No doubts. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye.
Bye.
So now I'll speak. I'm not sure how should I speak for the guys on the YouTube too. We have like 20 people checking the presentation out on YouTube, and we will have like a small break now, a coffee break, and we'll eat some, drink something, and like lay around for like 10 minutes, maybe 50, and then we will get for this our second talk of the day, which will be presented by Sonia, and that's all. I will just turn off the camera for some time, and we'll come back soon.
Eu não conheço muito essa coisa, mas não existia. Qual é o nome da empresa? A SIC, né? As máquinas, a GPU, não tem muita gente grande. Podia ter, né? Eu não pagava energia.
Okay, so we are ready to keep going to the next presentation. Now, the person who will talk will be Sonia. Let me see if you are showing up. You're not showing up on the screen. Just a second, because I need to plug some things in. Okay. There you go. So, hi, Sonia.
Hello.
The guys are hearing you now. Thank you for being part of this first Blockchain for Devs meetup. Sonia is from Polonia. She has a stablecoin company, and she's the CEO of the stablecoin. And she also the founder of the Wicked Crypto Meetup, which is like an awesome and huge meetup that happens for the whole over Europe. And she will do a presentation for us now. So feel free, Sonia, to talk wherever you want to.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I first have to somehow share my presentation with you, so let me figure this out.
There's maybe something on the right corner, on the bottom, start presentation, something like this. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, you have it?
Yeah, we have it.
Okay, cool. Oh, now when it's supposed to work, it doesn't.
You always have those risks, right?
Yeah. Oh, it actually doesn't. Okay, well, I'm gonna start not to waste your time. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to speak to you, even remotely. And I'm obviously jealous that you are in Florianopolis in Brazil and I'm in Poland because I love this place. I was there like a few months ago. Now I'm in Poland and it's like middle of the night, so don't judge me. I'm kind of tired. If I can somehow start this presentation, or probably not, because my computer just got completely stuck. It crashed.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, but literally, maybe it's just too much. Okay, let me start again.
The background mining running.
It wasn't supposed to be like this.
Let me change it to show us why we like.
I don't think it's too big or something. Yeah, my PowerPoint literally doesn't respond. Okay, so maybe without sharing my screen, I'm just gonna talk to you, and once my PowerPoint responds, I'm gonna show you my slides too. So a little bit about myself. I'm the CEO of Fiat-based token, and I will be talking about it a bit later. I'm also the organizer of Wicked Crypto Meetup, which is a series of meetups that we run in Poland. It's like one of the biggest meetups in Poland where we invite like international speakers who are actually involved in the creation of various projects. Like we had president of NEM as a speaker, and lots of other cool people. We also held some meetups in Paris and in New York. So I'm really glad to be participating in this event here in Florianopolis. So I always like to structure my presentations. So first, I would like to give you a little bit of introduction about smart contracts. Then I'm gonna tell you about the importance of stable coins and why are they useful and much needed in the space. I'm gonna tell you about our solution, which is called fiat-based token. And then after this introduction, a very long one actually, I'm going to tell you what are the problems that we encountered while writing our smart contracts, and what are the possible problems that we will encounter in the future. So, this PowerPoint doesn't work. So, smart contracts are obviously self-executing contracts that are written in a form of computer code and can be automatically executed. And the majority, I mean, the most important smart contracts that we hear about are based on Ethereum. These were the first smart contracts that we heard about. Although the concept was pretty old, like it was even in 90s that people started to talk about similar technology. And so how it actually, without slides is very, very difficult.
Yeah, feel free to take your time and set up.
Yeah, because I had those slides and I knew what to talk about. And
yeah, sure. Let me just exchange here so you feel more comfortable. And does anyone have a lightning talk maybe to talk in this event? Like, do you want to discuss a little bit something?
Well, I can talk about EOS later.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe. All right. You can try it here. Yeah, good. Yeah, I think it's
Veja, se está escondido, de repente deixa mesmo uma forma
I think maybe, like, do you want to talk a little about the US or?
Well, if you guys want to, I mean, I think she's going to be done before we even get set up. So
yeah, it might be, I think, but not like 100% sure. Yeah, do you know how much time do you need to set up the whole environment, Sonia?
I mean, I think I'm not sure what is the problem, because my presentation, obviously worked for a bit and now just doesn't respond anymore, the PowerPoint. I think it could be because of the connection.
Yeah, it might be. Do you want to reboot your computer and maybe try again? And in this meantime, someone could, I don't know, talk about something here. I'm not sure.
Sure. Yeah. Because, I also don't want to talk without slides, because then it's boring for people who are there. So.
Yeah, no problem at all. We could just like try a small talk here.
Okay.
Some lightning talk while you do the reboot and set up of the environment. And later we can try your presentation again, maybe.
Sure. Okay, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So go ahead and solve all the issues. There's no problem at all.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Sonia. So do you want to...
So how do I do it? I got my PC. Do I have to do it in English?
Yeah, I think it would be nice because, like, there are other specters on YouTube and
Okay.
like do you
Someone's
think
gonna throw the
yeah, I'm just not sure like if
with
you have the time to like put the PowerPoint and their PowerPoint at least. Because I will need to share the Hangouts and you could yeah, actually it might work. Because like you could or maybe you could just the lightning talk just over here and later
but I need the slides.
yeah. Yeah, no, but that's the thing. Then you wouldn't have to transmit the slides on the Hangouts. You could just use the projector, maybe.
Sure. Maybe. So you're saying I could just use the projector and
Yeah,
do the talk?
for sure.
Yeah.
So, do you think you?
Yeah.
So, feel free to. And we'll just like go out for a little and wait for Sonia. And in this meantime, we'll do a locally lightning talk over here. So we'll be back soon. Okay, hi Sonia.
Hey.
I'll just put you back here. And
Okay,
there you
cool.
go. So you're on the screen. Feel free to do your presentation now.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let's start again. Thank you so much that I can be here. I already said a few words about myself. So yeah, the plan of the presentation, intro to smart contracts, why is there a need for stable coins, what is our solution, and what are the challenges that we encountered while developing these solutions, and what are the possible challenges that we see that we will encounter in the future. So yeah, what are smart contracts? Self-executing contracts with the terms of the agreement being recorded as a computer code. Those contracts, yeah.
We're not able to see your presentation actually. It's basically all black, the screen. Okay, now we see. I think you can't actually put on presentation mode apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, do you think that you can make the presentation this way, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's not a problem for me. Yeah, okay.
Perfect then. Yeah, we're seeing you like on a huge projection here, so it's all fine for us too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so as we know, the first smart contracts were introduced by Ethereum, although the idea was older. And so why do we really want this automation with smart contracts? There are a number of advantages, and the main advantage is that it just takes less time than the traditional contract. There's also an automatic remittance, which means that the payment can be settled automatically and straight away. Escrow may not be necessary, as opposing to normal contracts. And here is also a point: fraction of the cost. Smart contracts are supposedly way cheaper than traditional contracts. That's not really true always. That's not always the case. The thing is that smart contracts are great for like high volume, pretty similar transactions. And the reason why is because smart contracts are pretty complicated to create. It costs lots of money to set up the entire environment. So like if you wanted to do just like one-off transaction and create the entire infrastructure for it, then that could be pretty costly. Also, if you have a very simple smart contract, then it's pretty cheap to execute. But more complicated smart contracts can be super expensive, and I can show you some examples later on of costs that we actually saw. How expensive can the smart contract be? So why smart contracts? There are a number of use cases that you probably can't see because of your screen size, but these use cases that I'm presenting here are more use cases of smart contract that can be used with a stable coin. So these are the use cases where the stable coin is needed the most. So decentralized exchanges, autonomous insurance, autonomous supply chain, crowdfunding and ICOs. That's pretty straightforward, and this is the biggest use case. But let me tell you about autonomous insurance. For example, in Europe, there is one insurance company who started to use smart contracts for their pilot insurance, and it's an insurance for delayed flights. So if you buy this insurance and your flight is delayed, then the airlines give the information to the smart contract through an oracle, and the contract can be automatically executed. The thing is that at the moment it's just the execution of the delay, but not the execution of the payment. So once the flight is delayed, there is an information for the customer that the flight was delayed, and this customer can actually choose can choose the payment method, how they want to receive the compensation. Why is it happening? Is because an insurance company can't start using Ether or cryptocurrency that is volatile in a, you know, on everyday basis. Insurance companies, they have lots of regulation that they have to comply with, and they cannot start using cryptocurrencies. So this is why we actually, this is why a stable coin is much needed here. There are a number of stable coins on the market, and there are 3 different approaches to how you can create a stable coin. So you can create a centralized IOU, and it's like Tether or TrueUSD. So this is these are the stable coins that are backed by fiat currencies. And as you may know, Tether has a different approach. They are, you know, not fully audited. TrueUSD has a slightly different approach because there are massive limits in terms of TrueUSD. I think the smallest amount you can purchase is like $10,000, and there are big limitations. Then you've got crypto collateral. So it's a stable coin created with the cryptocurrency being a collateral, which means that if so they are decentralized, but decentralized by design. But the thing is that if there is a massive drop in value of those cryptocurrencies who are in the collateral, then those stable coins become just, you know, they just lose the entire value. So this approach for now on is not perfect. And then there's also the approach of elastic supply. But this approach also has major flaws because there's no real collateral in elastic supply approach, and therefore there is a massive risk that those stable coins will lose their value. And so for now on, we believe that the best approach is to peg fiat currency into the stable coin. But we are also taking a different approach than Tether and different approach than TrueUSD. So the solution that we are proposing is, we call this project fiat-based token, just because it's, you know, you can tell straight away what we are creating, that we are creating a stable coin. But actually what we are doing is we are building a mobile payment application. You can see on the screen, this is the actual mobile application. We already have a prototype. And so how it works, you can set up your account. You will have your international bank account number, and you can send peer-to-peer instant transfers completely for free. And this is not based on Ethereum or nothing. This is just based on the private blockchain. So these peer-to-peer transfers. And then you can also spend this money with your debit card, and this is going to be a licensed electronic money institution. And so now the main difference of our approach is that you can settle smart contracts with this application as well. So I'm going to show you now like what is step-by-step approach to do it. Even though we managed to take some steps of this solution. So in our initial project, we were saying that you can top up the account, so you can receive your salary there, or you can make a money transfer, or you can top up with the credit card or debit card. This is the fastest way to top up your account, like your bank account, you know. And so our initial approach was to that you, as a user, you have to go and convert this money. So let's say you have 100 euros in your account, and you would have to convert it into 100 tokens, each worth €1. But we decided to get rid of this step, and this is going to be happening automatically. So all you do is, let's say you want to send money to an ICO, smart contract, right? So all you do is you type that you want to send, let's say, €1,000, and this will be automatically create, those stable coins will be automatically created in the backend. We will obviously tell you like what is the cost, because there is the gas cost that has to be covered by the customer, but we obviously won't require you to hold Ethereum on your wallet. So we will be covering the Ethereum part, but we will be taking off the fiat money from you. So we will inform you how much is the transfer before you make the transfer, and you can settle smart contracts straight away. And then it's the same thing when you want to spend money. So let's say you receive some fiat currency based on a public blockchain, and you will be able to spend it with a debit card in the shop straight away. Now I mentioned that this solution is going to be a licensed financial institution, and it means that it will be at the beginning it will operate only in European Union. It's very difficult to obtain a license for a financial institution, and you have to obtain a license for a financial institution in every single area where you want to operate. So you can't go global with this sort of solution. So at the beginning, this solution will exist only in European Union. Now, let me tell you about the challenges that we encountered while creating the smart contract. So one of the thoughts was, which token standard shall we use? Okay, and ERC20 is like the obvious, it's like the most popular standard, and most of the people use it for their tokens when they do an ICO or they create just some new applications. Then another one was whitelisting. Whitelisting because in our solution, each customer has to pass KYC. So we have to we have to know the information about our customers to comply with anti-money laundering laws, right? And so if we create a token for our customer, and then this customer normally would be able to send this token to anyone, and we can't allow this. So in our solution, we have to create a hybrid environment on Ethereum blockchain, even on public blockchain. And so in order to do that, we have to do whitelisting. And so whitelisting will allow us to know who are the customers who are transferring our tokens between themselves. Now, as you can see, I've put here an example. Bluezell paid almost the equivalent of $12,000 just to whitelist 7,400 users. Okay, so if we're thinking that maybe our application will have 50,000 users, 100,000 users, 200,000 users, then these costs are not acceptable, right? Because, and if you consider the volume of transactions, this example is just the money being paid into the ICO, right? So it's a single transaction model. But if we think about the volume of transactions, then this cost starts to become unbearable, right? Like it's not even worth using this sort of solution. And then one of the issues was the scalability. So I'm going to talk about this token standard scalability further. So this is the standard ERC20 smart contract. You can see that there are like six standard functions of this smart contract, and why I wanted to show you this, I don't know if all of you are developers or not, but the price of the smart contracts depends on amount of lines and functions that you include in your smart contract. So this is a very straightforward smart contract, and it has just these 6 functions. So this one is pretty cheap to implement. But if we now think about things like whitelisting, and we have to add some other functionalities, then it becomes like super expensive. And as you may know, ERC20 has this has a massive issue, because there are 2 functions: transfer and I think transfer from or approve. Not sure. The thing is that the function transfers a certain amount of tokens to another wallet address, and there is a possibility that if you use the function withdraw, approve and transfer from, with this combination, you can allow a smart contract to withdraw the specific amount of tokens from your balance. So if you use the transfer function to send tokens to smart contract by accident, then your payment will succeed, but you will lose your funds forever. So this is a very big issue, and many projects started, customers of many projects recently started to lose funds. There are, I think, like couple of $100,000 stuck on very many smart contracts, and those tokens, these cryptocurrencies are just, you just can't get them back. So this is a very big problem in ERC20, and there are new standards that are emerging, like ERC 223 and ERC 777, and those standards are supposed to solve the issues of ERC20 and also interoperate with ERC20 smart contracts. But in our case, this is not an issue, because as we said, we have to have whitelisting on our smart contract. So in our case, whitelist means that if I want to send funds to to another person, and this person is not whitelisted, then this transaction will be blocked, right? So so with this solution, there's like no possibility to make our customers lose their money by mistake, and especially that they don't really get to the entire environment, the entire UX design and user experience is set up in the way that our customers won't really have a possibility to make this sort of mistake, because we do all these transactions in the backend for them. So this is one of the issues with the token standard. In our case, ERC20 works well. The second issue that I mentioned was whitelisting, and I already briefly mentioned what are the costs associated with this. And if it comes to whitelisting, we are actually now discovering other options of how you can whitelist customers. So we are exploring now the idea of doing the whitelisting off-chain instead of on-chain, because these costs are for on-chain whitelisting. We are now exploring off-chain, and for now on, I can't tell you whether that's gonna work, and if because we are still sort of thinking about it. But yeah, this is one of the options to do it off-chain. And so I also mentioned as a third point scalability issues. Scalability issues of Ethereum. Ethereum was the first platform that introduced smart contracts. But as you can see, recently there are new platforms, new smart contract platforms that are emerging, and there are lots of different platforms. And they're all literally launching now. EOS launched just like a few weeks ago, and Eternity is gonna launch like middle of July, I think. And it's just the long-term plan with those smart contract platforms, because with other smart contract platforms, because they are just launching now, they are not tested. Yeah. And so these are the challenge, and I also want to wrap it up and tell you what are the challenges that we will encounter in the future, that we can predict that we will encounter them. So the reason why we've chosen Ethereum as the first one is just to create a fiat gateway for already existing applications, for ICOs that already exist. Even though Ethereum is not perfect, as you can see, because it's very expensive to create this sort of solution on top of Ethereum. So our solution in the future will be based on other smart contract platforms as well. So we are not creating just a stable coin for Ethereum, but also for Eternity in the future, and for other smart contract platforms. So now the challenges that we will encounter will be different smart contract programming languages. This is a big one, right? Because you need a whole range of different developers. Now you can see that like Neo accepts the majority of programming languages. Ethereum has Solidity, and like Viper will maybe work at some point at Ethereum, and then other Eternity has Solidity and few other programming languages. So the one good thing is that some of these platforms will actually accept Solidity to make it easier for other businesses to migrate, to move their applications from Ethereum to other decentralized platforms. And it makes sense, because if Ethereum won't become scalable pretty soon, then it won't be possible to create any more projects and to use the existing application more often. So that's one issue. Another issue will be the interoperability of those smart contracts, right? We will have smart contracts on various smart contract platforms, and this will definitely cause an issue for us. Different functionalities on each platform, right? So like Eternity has state channels and oracles built in. Other platforms have other functionalities, and this will be very difficult. It's like literally impossible to create just one standard for all the platforms. You literally have to build almost a tailor-made solution for each of these platforms. So this is not cost effective, right? Because you really need to put lots of effort, lots of human resources, lots of work of developers to be able to develop this sort of solution. But the benefit is that you will operate on various decentralized platforms, where and this will add scalability, and it will meet the needs of many more customers. And I guess I just wanted to tell you that. I don't know if I took too much time or not. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Also, if you want to contact me, you can email me. I hope you will be able to see it here. And yeah, thank you so much.
Let's give a round of applause for Sonia. Thank you, Sonia, for accepting the inviting of making this talk. Like, and sorry for keeping you awake until like probably 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's like 2:15. Yeah.
Does anyone have a question for Sonia about smart contracts?
No,
go for it. No.
So I just got a quick one.
Sure, go ahead.
So, do you track the these blockchains that I'm going to say serve to interoperate different blockchains like Aeon, Eon? I think also they sound alike. And would they help in this stablecoin environment ecosystem?
So, sorry, did you ask if we track them or if we are planning to implement them?
Yeah, I mean, if they are interesting in this, you know, to solve any of the problems that you have in your ecosystem, like would they? I mean, would they make your life easier? You know, if you could, you know, if you have one blockchain speak to another.
Sure. Yeah, of course. This is definitely something that we will have to explore further in the future. We totally know that this sort of solutions exist. The problem is to you know, arrange the entire. I don't know how to explain it. To arrange the balancing with our accounts, right? Because we will have multiple. The difficulty here is that we will have multiple accounts with deposits of money, right? And then we have multiple smart contracts on multiple platforms. This is where the complication comes. It's not just about different smart contracts communicating with each other, but it's also about the reconciliation of everything. Yeah. But this is one of the issues that I said we will encounter in the future. At the moment, we are developing the solution just on Ethereum blockchain. Like, it doesn't make sense to, you know, start with like go with the solution for all the blockchains, and some of them don't even exist yet, and their testnet and mainnet doesn't even work and has too many bugs. So like at the moment we are not really focused on this part. At the moment our main focus is how to reduce the cost of whitelisting on Ethereum blockchain.
Sure, got it. And how about the other initiatives like Bancor?
Yeah, but that's a banker. Like, this is a completely different thing, right?
Right. No, it's not related to the I'm going to say blockchain interoperability. It's more to do with the balance of I'm going to say tokens around the network, and if they would, how would they affect, for example, stable coins, or are they not really suited? They have no use in the world of stable coins.
Yeah, no, we don't really even consider them as any sort of competition or anything. Like, yeah.
No, sure. Just to know if it had any sort of application, because I'm also new to the idea, but yeah.
Yes,
No.
sir. If you're new to the idea, there's also Circle, who is now creating a stable coin. And this is actually a very interesting project. But some of their assumptions are just completely different than our assumptions. And even though they have like 8 million customers already, and they are planning to issue stable coins, we are not really worried because the market currently is so big, the market for stable coins, and there are just few solutions on the market at the moment, and there is space for many more stablecoin companies. And at the end of the day, each of these solutions are slightly different, and it will be up to the customer what are they most comfortable with, and whether they prefer a regulated solution or maybe something where they can have more privacy or yeah.
Sure. No, got it. I'm gonna do some research on my own. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, does anyone have more question? Oh, that's all. Okay, so thank you, Sonia, for helping us.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, we have a question over there.
Sorry, how can I download your application?
Oh, you can download it yet. That's definitely not gonna happen anytime soon. We are building the application now, so we have a prototype of our application, but that's pretty much just for internal use, like investor meetings and maybe to show it on a conference or events. But it's not publicly available to download.
Experimental. Okay, thanks.
All right, that's all. No more questions? Okay, then now it's time. Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks a lot.
We really appreciate the effort you're making to make this presentation for us, like in the 2 a.m. from Colony. And it was a great presentation. So we just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge over this. You're all new to this, like probably the guy here said. So really thank you for
Good rest.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. I must admit that at some points I was like, what am I supposed to say? Like, I'm just so tired. I had my coffee, but like 4 hours ago. Okay, thank you so much. I'm off to bed, and you guys have fun. Enjoy your time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. So now we'll have a quick break and to eat something, go to the bathroom, and then we get to the Guilherme's presentation, which will be the last presentation today, unless the guy here wants to do some lightning talk about EOS. But you could also do this talk on the next Blockchain for Devs, maybe a full talk with slides and everything else. But it's all up to you. Like we are on it. Okay, so we'll be back soon. So we'll be back now with the meetup, with our last talk of the day, which Guilherme will present the challenges of writing smart contracts. So you go, Guilherme.
I'll start talking a little bit about me. So I graduated in electrical engineering here at the Federal University. I have a background in telecom, so I've been working with it for the past 4 to 5 years, mainly in infrastructure. And then I decided to turn my career around and become a developer. And I've been here in Cheesecake Labs for about 1 year now, working mainly with Python and JavaScript, React and Django frameworks. In 2016, I got in touch with blockchain for the first time when a friend of mine sent me an email saying that he was buying some GPUs for mining. And I was like, what? Why not? Well, buy 4 GPUs for what now? And then I asked him all about it and started to become more familiarized with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I was like, okay, why not give that a shot? And I bought myself a couple of GPUs and started mining as well. I had no idea what I was doing, but I started researching it, and the more I found out about it, the more passionate I became about it, and I really liked it. So after I became a developer, I started to go more in-depth with that and started to learn how to develop smart contracts. And this is what this presentation is about. One of the things that I tried to do after learning a little bit and playing around with some smart contracts was to find something that I could turn into a decentralized app, just for fun's sake, just to see how it would play out. A little bit about the Ethereum network before that, so you guys can understand what I'm talking about exactly, in case you're not familiarized with it. The Ethereum virtual machine, basically it runs transactions, executes contract codes, and stores the contract state on the Ethereum blockchain. And it charges for those operations using gas. This is one of the main concepts that we're going to talk about here. So it's important that you understand it. Gas means that every operation that runs on the virtual machine costs some amount of it, and it's priced in Ether. So gas, every instruction has a gas cost, and this gas cost is multiplied by this gas price that is charged in Ether. So you will have to pay Ethereum for every instruction that you run on a smart contract. Most operations cost very little gas, but reading and writing from contract state costs a lot more, which means storing data on a blockchain can get very expensive. So for the proof of concept that I thought about, we have here at Cheesecake Labs English Day. So every Tuesday we have a voting, and we talk in English all day long, and we vote later for up to 5 people that we thought really did their best effort to speak in English. This vote lasts until the next day. Everyone can vote up to 5 people. You can now, that's your rule, vote for yourself. And you can only vote once per session. Votes are kept in a scoreboard, and every 30 votes, you win a prize. So I thought this would be a very interesting set of rules to work on a proof of concept. So that's my starting point. I've developed this smart contract, and after doing so, I started to notice some interesting things, some challenges about it. Right now, the current architecture of the English Day works pretty much like this. We have a device, a mobile device, an app that runs on it. Through an API, it contacts a backend server, which is on the cloud, that handles authentication, the application logic, and data storage. My idea would be to turn that into something like this, where the user would use a browser, the user would be responsible for his own authentication, and through a smart contract interface, it will talk to a blockchain node. Every node has a copy of the blockchain, and in that copy of the blockchain, it has the copy of the contract, which stores the whole application logic and data storage. So the first thing we can note about this is that we've removed authentication from the server. Authentication is now based on the user. So that's not very nice, but okay, let's go on with that. So all the logic and state are now on the contract. So the operations that we have to make this voting system works are now all on the contract, which means the contract has a user creation and deletion system to know who is allowed to vote for who. They can start and end voting sessions. You can cast your votes, and you can check for the leaderboard. You can actually carry the contract state and receive every user and the amount of votes it has. The user authentication is done on the browser through MetaMask, which means that you have to have an Ethereum wallet to be authenticated. Your wallet address is your account.
So people are paying for both, or you're using the testnet.
We are using the testnet, but that's one of the issues that we're going to discuss right now. So yeah, users need to have a wallet and need to pay for their votes.
Nobody's voting anymore.
And the cost of the logic is too high. So here are some sample costs. The deployment of the contract itself, the operation to create a user, the operation to start a session, the vote for 5 users that I'm assuming everyone would vote for the maximum amount of users they could. You could vote for just 1 user, but up to 5. So let's work with the worst case scenario. And the controls to end the session. These don't mean much if we look at them without a frame of comparison. So let's talk with a better frame of comparison. Putting this cost in perspective is what I mean. In US dollars, the deployment of the contract is not that costly, and also the operations don't seem that costly. But let's go a little bit in depth about each of those operations. The deployment of the contract is a base cost, which means we will pay only once. The operations of start and end session are per session. So if we run a session each week, we will pay this total amount of these two combined each week. Still not that many, okay? This cost here would be per user. So if we have 10 users, we will pay $4, and that will escalate for as many users that we have on this app. But still, it's a one-time only cost. You create a user, it's on the contract. But then we have the cost for the votes. This is per user and per session. So you are paying almost $1 for 1 user to vote every Tuesday. We can see that this quickly gets out of control. The create user costs are still a one-time only. They get expensive, but they're still one-time only. You could even try to justify that, but you cannot justify in a company like Cheesecake Labs that we have about 50 employees. You cannot justify paying this per week. It's simply way too much to run a simple voting system. So can we improve this? No. Well, you are not wrong. We cannot improve if we stay fully decentralized. So I started thinking about a not so decentralized approach, which means I'm thinking here that this is not really a public application. Most of you are not employees, so you would not be allowed to vote. So why would I even handle that case? So we already have an authentication server here. We have a server, an internal server for authentication. So I could use that. I don't need you to authenticate. I don't need to have another database with users if I already have one. So we can set up a wallet on the server that would handle all transactions, and not in this way we would release the users from the burden of having to use MetaMask, and they would not need to pay for the votes anymore, because since all transactions are now signed from the back-end wallet, users don't need the wallet. So okay, we made one improvement here that solves the problems of having to create users and users having to use MetaMask and buy Ethereum, which, well, maybe people just don't want to buy cryptocurrencies just to be able to vote. So this solves some of our problems, but not all of them, because voting is still the largest part of our expenses, and it's still very expensive. So enter events. Events are emitted by contracts, by transactions. They're recorded on transactions on the blockchain, and they are significantly cheaper than contract storage. But they have this property that contracts cannot access those logs. So they are recorded on each transaction on the Ethereum network, but they are not contract state. Contracts cannot read from them. They can only emit them. But we can use them. Let's get down to what really matters. How much logic do we actually need on the blockchain? What value does the blockchain bring to this case? What are we really trying to decentralize here? If we have a voting application, do we really need to handle all the logic on the blockchain? Or can we just record the votes on the blockchain? After all, if you have a black box, you don't really need to understand how it works if you can prove that what it outputs is really what you were expecting. So what I mean is, if we can audit the votes, we can be pretty much safe that it's working as intended. So how about we keep all the logic on the backend and keep only the vote records on the blockchain? How can we do that? Using events, we can pretty much strip everything from the contract, from the smart contract.
Yeah, from the smart contract, yes.
Pretty much make a contract that can only be accessed by the backend wallet, only emits votes, and it does all the authentication, all the logic on the backend. So you can save a lot of cost doing that. So we have now a reduced deployment cost because our contract is much smaller. We have way less logic, which also contributes to being cheaper. And the main cost of voting has been reduced significantly, because for a storage operation on Ethereum, it would cost about 20,000 gas, and the event log operation is like 1/10 of that. So right now, this new version of the contract makes it so that every vote emits up to 5 events. The backend controls all this logic, but the votes are still auditable. If you fetch the logs from any blockchain node, you can parse all the votes and make sure that they are correct. Each user would be able to consult the votes and make sure that his vote was really recorded. So this is the cost comparison, using state, which was the previous version, and using events, which is our current version. You can see that it has reduced in cost significantly. The cost is down to 30,000 gas from 189,000. Breaking down this cost, we can see that the transaction cost is still a large part of the total cost. And the way this contract works right now is that every user that votes makes it so that the backend sends one transaction to the blockchain. And as you can see here, 2/3 of the cost is the transaction alone. So there is still room for improvement. we can take a page for something that we Brazilians already know very well. A real thing, how the real vote works. Right now, we have these little urns here that store all the voting data, and at the end of the voting session, they transmit all of the voting data. If we try to use the same logic here and make the backend responsible for storing all the votes during each of the session, and at the end of the session, logs every vote using just one transaction, we can reduce this cost even further. So here's the final cost comparison. You can see that the costs have been lowered significantly, because even if we have 50 users and we emit 50 logs just by using one transaction and not having to pay the transaction costs every time for each user, we can reduce this by a very, very large factor. This starts to become feasible. We start to think that maybe this can be used in practice. So the conclusion here is something that the other presentations have already discussed a little bit. We can safely conclude that transaction costs right now on the Ethereum blockchain are heavy, because even if you have a working decentralized app, you cannot make it really feasible simply because the throughput of the transactions, if they are too large, they become really, really expensive. So if we have like CryptoKitties, famous Ethereum app that locked down the network, well, you have few transactions there. You buy your kitties, you procreate them, you sell them. So they're pretty much market transactions. You buy, you sell, you trade. They're atomic transactions. They occur, every user is responsible for just a couple of transactions. That doesn't cost too much. But if we're talking about a voting system, let's maybe try to think about a voting system that could work for maybe an entire country. It would very quickly become very expensive. So we have to think about other solutions. The obvious, I think the obvious thinking that we can conclude here is that the further we go from the blockchain, the cheaper it becomes, because the current tech is way cheaper than blockchain. But also the same problems that we're trying to solve with the blockchain start to come back. Because in this last scenario, how can we really be sure that the state has not been tampered with? Which is also the problem that we have with the voting system in Brazil. We're not really sure that the state inside those urns has not been tampered with. So what this means is that right now, especially if your application is heavy on transactions, it is probably not going to be cheap. This is a very common problem. It's already known problem of scalability on Ethereum, and the developers are trying to solve this. But what I can safely say to you guys from my experience in developing those proof of concepts and those smart contracts is that right now we can play a little bit around them. We can maybe create one or two working cases for very atomic and far between transactions, but you cannot expect something with a large throughput. You cannot really expect to be writing and reading a lot from the blockchain without some heavy costs. So that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
What about running our own blockchain?
Yeah, that's one possible solution. You can run your own blockchain with reduced costs, and then now and then upload your whole state to the Ethereum blockchain, costing way less. That's one possible solution.
Yeah, but for your application, it's like for Cheesecake internally. So if we maintain our own blockchain, our bots there, and
reduce the cost of loading. Why would we need to move everything to the single name?
Well, that then you're really going back to the dilemma of why using a blockchain. Because if you have your own internal blockchain, who is validating it? If you are validating your own blockchain, why are you using it? You can just use a normal database. The idea with the blockchain is that you can be certain, yeah, it certifies that the information there is true. If you're the only one certifying, you can certify whatever you want. If you have a private blockchain, like many different companies, many different nodes interacting, you can be more certain, but then you get to the same problem that really started the whole blockchain revolution, which is what incentive people have to keep that data correct. And Bitcoin solved that by rewarding people with Bitcoins. So if you have that really is a question of mine, that if you have a private blockchain, what incentivizes you really have to validate that data? How can you make sure that people can trust each other? Bitcoin really did a huge leap forward, guaranteeing that, not really guaranteeing, but making it very worth your while to be a good actor in the system.
What if each computer inside Cheesecake run a node for our own blockchain? Every like employee validates the votes of everyone. So like instead of having only one person validating our votes on each server, we could like decentralize through all the computers and validate our own blockchain there.
It's not so secure because it's not a lot of computers. So it's easy to brute force that. It's not a lot of computers.
Yeah, it's not a lot of computers, and you
it's
could
easier to use a cryptographic stuff. It's just hash 256. So it's easier.
Can you guarantee that all of the people are honest?
Yeah, that's another problem.
And also you could end up using a lot of energy.
One case where the private blockchain can work is like for IBM. They have their own private blockchain because they are a huge company. So they have a lot of computers and a lot of mainframes. So they can control and keep the secure of everything. So this is one thing that works for a private, but it's not the case for you.
But from what I've been keeping up to, I think that one possible solution is pretty much, like you said, that you would keep some of the state off-chain. You would make maybe a private, smaller chain where everyone is trustworthy, and then you would just upload like snapshots of these states onto the blockchain. I think that's one possible solution for that. And it's pretty much almost what I ended up with by stripping down the whole system until what I really had on the blockchain was just a log of each voting session.
Nice.
Any more questions?
Regarding the security, I'm not totally familiar with smart contracts, but how can you guarantee that all data that runs this contract is allowed to run these transactions? This is possible. Like, why can I run a transaction inside of this smart contract? How can you guarantee this?
You are validated by your wallet.
But how can you make sure that my wallet is allowed to run transactions inside of these smart contracts? Just not from you, smart contracts.
It's pretty much the same way that the transaction works. That you would have when you upload that data is actually a transaction that is signed with, in this case, would be the backend wallet, and then the contract has that wallet's address hard coded. So when it gets there, it can certify that this wallet has signed it.
All right, but how can you make the 50 wallets be allowed to write on the same contract or to run the same transactions?
Oh, okay. So you mean that like in the first case where you keep the users on the blockchain? So I've used a system that I found in a blog post that keeps two data structures in sync that would be like a list of users. One is a mapping of each address to user attributes, and another one is an array of users. And the two structures talk to each other to know how many users you have and the data for each one. So when the transaction comes in, you have this function that you can see what's the address of the sender. So you can use your map to check if that address is a valid user. That's how you make a list. Like Sonia said before me, that's how you whitelist people to use your contract. And that can get very expensive if you have a large amount of users.
Can you use the Stellar network as a proof of concept with the same app?
Actually, that's what I was going to try next, because I got interested in seeing how that would work. I really don't know much about developing smart contracts on anything but Ethereum, but I'm interested to know how that would work.
Yeah, just to give an opinion about this, I think you can create just an asset, and every user of this voting system could be a user on the Stellar network, and he could receive votes, and he will have the vote. So I think it will definitely work, because in this case you're basically exchanging something. So this definitely will work with Stellar, and it will be super cheaper and super fast. That's why I like Stellar. Is one of my personal favorites platforms, because like him said, it's super user friendly, and it's super quickie and super cheap. If you think about it, it's almost irrelevant, the cost of a transaction.
You can implement something like that in Ethereum using, for instance, ERC20 tokens, but then you would pretty much just create another coin, which would be freely tradable, but will have the inherent problems of coins. And one of them is transaction cost. When I'm giving you $100 and I'm paying 20 cents in transaction costs, it's okay. But when I'm voting, I'm just logging one information and I'm paying 20 cents for that. That's way too much. So the scope really changes a lot. In my opinion, the blockchains that we have today, like Ethereum, they're well suited for transferring value, for transferring money. Because, like I said, what's 20 cents to $100? You pay more than that on your banks. Well, most banks. Now we're starting to have some free transfers, but you would pay R$7 for a TED, for a transfer, right? That would not be something out of the world. It's something ordinary. So in that sense, it would really make sense. But if you have an application, any application, let's say that you would want to update your username, or your credit card or your address, if you pay 20 cents for each of these updates, it will really start to become free.
You can use IOTA to do that. You can send strings for free inside the thing. You can just send the ID of the vote, or each guy here send for the address, and then you use a wrapper API, get all the transactions from that address, and then you have it. Because you have the address of each one inside a Tango Explorer. It's just a website to have a Tango, like the blockchains this way, and then you have all the votes.
Yeah, I'm really not that familiar with IOTA, but it sounds interesting.
It's good. It's good. Something take a look. For your situation here, you can use it for free. Have it done and very secure.
So we have another option.
Yeah, maybe you could do also a talk about IOTA on the next blockchain for devs. We should do that, please.
I go over for him.
A little bit.
Yeah, so let's give a round of applause for Gordon. So we just wanted to thank you all for coming to the first blockchain for devs. And we have some infos. How do we
the other way around. There you go.
Okay, so thank you guys. And to get more infos about the event, you can access our Meetup, which you probably already have seen. And if you want to submit a talk or something like that, like two guys here, please send an email to Bizarre or to Guilherme and start this post, or just send a message to the Meetup. It's everything fine. And we really need more talks for the next event. ideally, I think it would be awesome if we could do this each quarter, maybe, but we need talks for that. So, like, we need that you guys contribute to make the blockchain for devs really happen. And we're hiring, so if there's any like blockchain dev here that wants to work in a company like us, please just send an email to you or be part of our process, and let's do this, right? And now I think I will turn off the YouTube transmission so we can like network and do whatever we want here. Thank you guys on YouTube for being with us until now, and that's all. Bye.